look at transaction monitoring engineered for growth. I'll invite here Maksym Lebedyev from AML technology or technology specialist of MAL. And to make it short, business need real-time financial crime insights to put them in control. How to do it, you'll tell us, I'm pretty sure.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you to organizers, first of all, for having us. It's a real pleasure. I come from London and represent company Comply Advantage, which is a RegTech company. And today, a lot of colleagues of mine spoke a lot about automation, AI, API. So I'm going to continue the theme. And the purpose of this presentation is really to have a look at the traditional old school approach, as we call it, to AML screening and transaction monitoring. And during my very biased presentation, I will demonstrate some of the challenges that the companies and our customers experienced prior to approaching us, and what successful leaders are doing to gain competitive advantage, to reduce operational costs, and most importantly, keep regulators happy. Okay? So if we look at some of the organizations that we help today, and we've been fortunate to work with some of the leading companies, fintechs in the world, like for example, let's look at Airwallex, which is a unicorn. So they evaluated over $1 billion. Another organization worth talking about is Earthport. They've recently been acquired by Visa in a very aggressive bidding war with MasterCard. Zopa is another one, the #2 P2P lender in the world. And also some of the traditional vendors like Santander, Bank of America, Alpha Bank have entrusted us to carry out their AML checks and transaction monitoring. Having spoken to all of these organizations when they've approached us, we could, there's loads of challenges that they face, but we could see like 3 main challenges that were pretty much identical across the board. So first of all, legacy technology was no longer supporting the drive and the need for fast implementation. And also, I was speaking to one of the colleagues today. He actually asked me, do you know how many technologies banks use? And he said it was 400. I didn't know that, but reality is how do you make sure that those systems interconnect with each other on the scale, right? So that was one of the issues. And the more successful these companies have become in terms of getting bigger customer user base and getting more successful in terms of volume of transactions and revenue, the more unmanageable and costly was their compliance function. And lastly, if you look at recent headlines and what's going on between US and China, Huawei situation, regulatory and political and economical landscape changes on a daily basis with new people and new private entities and corporate entities being listed every single day. How do you make sure that your customer risk status reflects those, right? So that's some of the challenges, and also, looking kind of in the future and looking at some of the best practices or pillars of success, what helped these organizations to become leaders in their space, we could clearly identify some of the points. So let's have a look at those. So first of all, it's using real-time data intelligence, which is collected as soon as the entity is released, as opposed to when the analyst of the solution comes to work in the morning, has a cup of coffee, has a chat with the friends, looks at the database, does the research, and actually puts the entity into the database, which, again, from what we told, can take anything between 24 to 48 hours, leaving you as a financial institution exposed to risk, right? So having a consolidated AML vendor, which helps you to identify the entity and the risk of it with linked transactions all in one place, are giving your analyst a bird's eye view to make a quick decision what to do with that entity. Again, reducing the operational costs and time required. Configurable risk-based approach to reflect jurisdictional and geographical needs of your business, implemented in days, not months, via flexible RESTful API. So again, coming back to proliferation of the systems that financial institutions use, if the analyst makes a decision in the AML solution, that decision should be replicated across the board in your CRM, in your core banking system, and any other platforms that you utilize, as opposed to manually duplicating the efforts and logging into separate systems. And finally, using a globally distributed infrastructure in the cloud, so you can focus on attracting and servicing clients as opposed to maintaining the server in the room, right? Anyone disagrees? Okay. So let's see how Comply Advantage fits with that success story. So we are a full cycle, all-in-one AML technology and database provider. So the foundation of everything that we do is our own proprietary database. We don't lease it, don't buy it. So it's driven by automation, AI, and machine learning. So if we look at coverage, we cover global sanctions and thousands of watch lists, which are updated every 15 minutes for any changes that may occur to existing entities, or if there are new entities has been added to the list. Our PEP data is classified using FATF classification, and natural language processing technology helps us to analyze over 150 million articles per month, and not just finding matches that you would on Google, for example, but also understanding the context of the article, so your analyst can easily determine whether that's related, whether the content is related to financial crime, terrorism, violence, narcotics, and so on. From a module standpoint, we provide initial customer screening at the moment of onboarding and ongoing monitoring. Again, we do that on a daily basis, and we can apply ongoing monitoring to the entire customer base if you wish. Our instant counterparty payment screening is the module that high-velocity remittance and payment companies absolutely love, because it gives them an instant match, no match, and the payment either goes through instantaneously or is stopped for review. And last but not least, we provide a real-time or retrospective transaction monitoring solution that can identify patterns of suspicious behavior based on regulatory requirements. So, for example, payment limit, and you need to do EDD, high-risk country, or risk word was found in the reference text, or some of the policies the company or your business may have, like, for example, amount exceeds an estimate, or payment limit exceeds average, many transactions, many accounts to one, or one to many, and many other highly customizable rules. So in conclusion, let's have a look at a case study that we've done together with an Earthport. Today, they are Visa-owned, as I mentioned, global payment network, operating over 65 countries. And if you look at their annual report for last year, they've processed 11.5 million transactions with a total turnover of 12 billion. So when they approached us, their incumbent solution didn't provide a scalable infrastructure, which resulted in frequent failures and outages. And even when the API wasn't failing, it could take anything between 10 to 40 seconds to respond, which resulted in customer churn and associated revenue loss with that. Because Earthport operates, the customer base of Earthport could vary from little, small remittance companies to global banks operating across multiple jurisdictions, countries, and geographies. Their one-fit-for-all approach was no longer working and resulted in high operational overhead. So they needed a scalable transaction monitoring solution that could cope with high volume of transactions and screened against thresholds and segments corresponding to their unique customer base and specific client. And a similar situation was occurring on screening of counterparties. So their solution was producing a high level of false positive degrees. Again, we say high level around 3%, but if you take into consideration they had 11 million transactions a year, that's enough to keep a little army of analysts busy for quite some time. So as a solution, we provided them with a single tenanted environment hosted on AWS with an average response time of 250 milliseconds. We were able to, so the transaction monitoring module took around 3 months to implement, and we looked at their customer base, and based on their customer criteria, we put together segments and thresholds and rules associated with each of those segments. So that that tailor-made approach actually allowed them to fulfill their ambition to be a leader in straight-through processing. And lastly, we again looked at their customer activity, so where the payments were coming from and to different geographies, and we created search profiles. So what that meant is that sender and beneficiary were screened against sanctioned list and a warning list in the geographies where the payment came from, and to avoiding all of the rest, all the hundreds of other lists that could potentially produce false positive, and that exercise resulted in a false positive alert rate to be less than 0.5%. So now we have a happy customer. Thank you very much for your attention, and welcome any questions.
So, any questions? Because you managed to be quite fast, which is nice because we are quite behind the schedule. So just let me thank you. That was Maksym Lebedyev.